Before we get into today's conversation, we want to let you know that the complete curriculum we're discussing today, including all 32 session plans, 35 reproducible client handouts, and the full clinical framework, is available as a book. You can find the purchase link in the episode description below. Now, let's get into it. So, imagine you have a client. Let's say, they are incredibly motivated.
Right, they really want to be there.
Exactly. They show up early to every single intensive outpatient session. They can logically recite all their CBT triggers right back to you.
Yeah, they have the whole relapse prevention plan memorized.
Completely memorized. They genuinely want to get better. And yet, despite doing, everything right on paper, they still experience these severe recurring relapses.
It's so frustrating for everyone involved.
It really is. And as a clinician, you're sitting across from them looking at their perfectly filled out worksheets, and you're just wondering, why is standard treatment completely failing this person? So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are speaking directly to you, the clinicians, the counselors, and the mental health practitioners who are really doing the heavy lifting out there in structured treatment settings.
The ones actually in the room.
Exactly. Our focus today is the Trauma-Informed Addiction Recovery Curriculum by Jeevan Holden Rutto. And we are unpacking what is really a fundamental shift in how we treat addiction.
It's a massive shift. I mean, it really changes everything about how you practice. We're moving entirely away from viewing substance use as a moral failing or a lack of willpower or some, mysterious lack of motivation.
Right.
Instead, we're looking at addiction as a biological regulatory strategy. It's a strategy built by a nervous system that actually survives severe adversity.
Which is such a paradigm shift, right? Asking what if the addiction isn't a failure, but actually the nervous system's most successful attempt at staying regulated.
Exactly. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do to survive.
So I'm looking at the historical context in the source material, and it makes me wonder, if standard IOP curricula, the ones handing out all those CBT worksheets, if they often hit a wall with these clients, what data were the original designers of those older programs missing?
Well, basically, they were missing the foundational data on trauma.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of standard group addiction curricula used today in intensive outpatient programs, or IOPs, and partial hospitalization programs, PHPs.
The standard structured settings.
Right. Those were actually designed well before the adverse childhood experiences research, the ACE research, existed as an organizing clinical framework.
Wow.
Yeah, so those older models, they're brilliant at addressing the behavioral endpoint of addiction. But they simply weren't built to address the neurobiological mechanisms producing that behavior in the first place.
Let's talk about that ACE research for a second, because the landmark study by Felitti and Anda, I think it came out in 1998.
Yes, exactly.
The numbers in there are just staggering. They found that over 60% of adults in the general public carry at least one adverse childhood experience.
Which is huge.
It is. So if 60% of the general public has at least one ACE, what does that mean for you as a clinician walking into an addiction treatment group every single morning? What does your room actually look like?
Oh, it means that in your specific clinical setting, that number is substantially higher. It's often nearing 100%.
Wow.
Yeah. But, it's not just about the mere presence of adversity. It's about the volume. The ACE research established what we call a dose-response relationship.
Meaning the higher the dose of trauma.
Exactly. The more adversity a person experienced before the age of 18, the more severe and, frankly, treatment-resistant their addiction is likely to be.
So it scales up.
Right. To put actual numbers to it, an individual with 4 or more ACEs is anywhere from 4 to 12 times more likely to develop substance use problems compared to someone with 0 ACEs.
4 to 12 times more likely? That is massive. And you really see this show up in the room. There's a case study in the text about a client named Riley that stood out to me.
Oh, Riley's case is a perfect example.
Yeah, so Riley had an ACE score of 8 out of 10. They had been through standard treatment before. They knew all the cognitive models, but they relapsed again. And Riley's description of the relapse really stuck with me.
What did they say?
They said it didn't feel like making a decision to drink. It felt like waking up somewhere they had already arrived.
Yeah, that phrase, waking up somewhere they had already arrived, is incredibly precise from a clinical standpoint.
Really? How so?
Well, Riley's nervous system had a baseline arousal state of chronic anxiety. Because of their severe childhood trauma, their HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is essentially the body's central alarm system.
Right, the alarm system.
It was constantly stuck in the on position. Riley had literally never registered below a 4 on a 0 to 10 stress scale.
So for Riley, taking a drink wasn't like a calculated choice about having a good time or ignoring their relapse prevention plan.
No, not at all. It was the only available tool to make the internal noise stop.
Yeah.
The alcohol was performing a regulatory function that Riley's own dysregulated nervous system just couldn't perform on its own.
That makes so much sense. So the reframe for the practitioner listening right now is huge. You absolutely have to stop asking the client, what is wrong with you? Or why aren't you motivated?
Yes.
And you have to start asking, what happened to you? And what did your body learn to do to survive it?
That is the core shift right there.
But here is where I get stuck, right? If addiction is this deeply ingrained nervous system adaptation, how does that actually play out in real time? Like when a client is sitting in your group therapy room, actively trying to learn a new coping skill, how does the biology hijack the therapy?
Okay, so to understand how the biology hijacks the therapy, we have to look at the window of tolerance.
Let's break that down for people who might not have somatic training.
Sure. In plain language, your window of tolerance is the specific zone of physiological arousal where your nervous system functions adaptively.
Okay.
It's the zone where your thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, is adequately online.
Right.
When you are inside this window, you can process new information, you can learn cognitive skills, and you can engage with other people. But clients with high ACE scores, like Riley, have characteristically narrow windows.
Right. Their threat detection system is just hypersensitive.
Exactly. They get pushed out of that window into hyperarousal, which looks like panic, rage, or extreme anxiety. Or they fall into hyperarousal, which looks like numbing, dissociation, or shutting down. And it happens very, very easily.
I always try to visualize this to make it concrete. It feels like trying to download a massive complex software update on a computer with a dying battery.
Well, that's a great analogy.
Right, like the cognitive skills you're teaching in group therapy, the thought records, the pros and cons lists, those are great pieces of software. But the hardware system, the client's nervous system, is too drained or overactivated to actually process and install them.
That is perfect. You're handing them a sophisticated program, but the machine simply doesn't have the power to run it.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second, because I know what a lot of clinicians are probably thinking.
Sure, go ahead.
Clients often come into group after a relapse, right? And they tell us exactly what was going through their head right before they use. They say, I was driving home, I thought to myself, I've had a terrible day, I deserve a drink, so I pulled over.
Right. They have a clear narrative.
Exactly. Doesn't that prove their prefrontal cortex, their thinking brain, was online? I mean, they clearly formed a thought and made a choice.
It's a really great point, and it's actually the exact reason why standard treatment models get so confused. The curriculum answers this by breaking down what it calls the 5-link trigger chain.
The 5-link trigger chain. Okay, how does that work?
Well, standard treatments assume the thought is the beginning of the chain. It's not. Let's walk through it. Link 1 is a sensory or contextual cue.
Like what?
Maybe it's a specific smell, a time of day, or, a tone of voice from a boss. Then link 2 is the somatic state. This is how the body biologically responds to that cue, like a sudden drop in the stomach or invisible tightening of the chest.
A physical reaction before you even realize it.
Exactly. Link 3 is emotional activation, a sudden wave of unnamed dread, shame, or panic.
Okay.
Then we get to link 4. This is the thought. I've had a terrible day, I deserve a drink. And finally, link 5 is the substance use itself, the behavioral action.
Wow. Okay, wait. So the thought that they are reporting to us is actually link 4. It's almost at the very end of the process.
Precisely. And here is the massive gap in standard relapse prevention. Almost entirely addresses link 5 or sometimes link 4.
Okay.
Yeah, we teach clients to catch the high-risk thought or use an alternative behavior. But by the time the client is consciously having that thought at link 4, the biological chain has been running below conscious awareness for minutes, maybe even hours.
That's wild.
Treating only link 5 is basically treating the symptom of a chain whose earlier links remain completely intact and active. The body actually made the decision to escape at link 2. The brain just justified it later at link 4.
That completely blows up the traditional idea of a relapse. The body decides to flee at link 2, and the brain just comes up with a story at link 4 to explain why we are running.
Yes.
There's a case in the curriculum about a client named Avery that illustrates this perfectly.
Avery's story is so common, too.
It is. She described her baseline reality as feeling like she was standing on the second floor of a burning building, even while she was just sitting calmly in the IOP room.
Right. Her threat detection system was constantly firing.
Yeah. Her prefrontal cortex was perpetually compromised by this hyperarousal. So, if Avery's battery is completely dead, handing her a standard CBT thought record in that moment is practically useless.
Right. A thought record completed in a state of acute somatic dysregulation is not a therapeutic intervention. It's just a written behavior performed while the prefrontal cortex is offline.
Yeah.
The regulator just isn't there to do the work.
So, okay, if standard thought records are useless when a client is dysregulated like Avery, how do you completely rebuild a 32-session program so you aren't just handing out useless worksheets? Like, where do you even start?
You start by completely restructuring the timeline of treatment. This curriculum is built on a 4-module architecture, and it radically refuses to rush the process.
I noticed that.
Yeah. Module A spans 8 full sessions and is dedicated entirely to safety and stabilization. The singular goal here is widening that window of tolerance we talked about.
What are they actually doing for those 8 sessions, though?
They are doing intensive grounding and somatic work, but they aren't teaching grounding as like a fluffy relaxation technique.
Right.
It is taught as a vital neurobiological intervention designed to activate the ventral vagal circuit. Activating that circuit is essentially flipping the body's biological switch from threat mode to social safety and connection.
Help me understand the pacing here, though. As clinicians, we are constantly pressured by insurance limitations and, we are trained to get to the root of the trauma quickly.
Right, the pressure is real.
Are you saying we should actively avoid talking about the trauma for the first 8 weeks of this program? Doesn't that feel like stalling?
It feels like stalling until you realize that processing trauma without a regulatory foundation actually causes acute destabilization.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
If you ask a client to process severe childhood sexual abuse or neglect before they have the somatic tools to stay within their window of tolerance, you aren't doing therapy. You are actively re-traumatizing them.
Yep.
To go back to your analogy, Module A isn't about installing new software. It's literally just plugging the computer into the wall so it has enough battery to run without crashing.
Right.
You have to build that physiological capacity first.
Okay, that makes total sense. You power up the hardware first, and then once they have that battery life, we move into Module B, which is understanding patterns.
Yes, exactly.
And this is where the curriculum introduces its central clinical tool, which is the 7-layer pattern map. Walk us through how this works in the room.
The pattern map is how Module B makes the invisible visible. Literally on a whiteboard or a large piece of paper, the clinician helps the client trace their specific 5-link trigger chains backwards.
Okay.
Yeah, but it goes deeper. They map out layer by layer. What is the substance use? Underneath that, what is the automated thought? Underneath that, what is the core shame belief?
Like, I am unlovable or I am always in danger.
Exactly. And underneath that, they map their default survival responses. When under threat, does this client default to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn?
So they see the whole picture.
Right. By mapping out all 7 layers, links 1 through 3 of the trigger chain, those somatic cues and bodily states, they finally become visible to the client. And what becomes visible can finally be intervened upon.
It takes all the mystery and, honestly, the shame out of the relapse.
It really does.
It's no longer a client sitting there saying, I just suddenly lost control, I'm a total failure. They can look at the map and say, oh, my boss used a specific tone of voice, which triggered a freeze response in my body, which triggered my core belief that I am worthless, which led to the thought that I should drink.
They can literally see the dominoes falling.
That's amazing.
Precisely. And once the map is drawn, we enter Module C, which is processing and meaning making. This is where the heavy emotional lifting happens.
The text mentions processing disenfranchised losses in this module. What does that actually mean mechanically for the client?
Disenfranchised loss basically refers to a grief that isn't typically recognized or validated by society.
Like what?
Well, in trauma recovery, it's grieving the childhood that never happened. Right. It's processing the anger that while other kids were learning how to safely play and self-soothe, your client was learning how to dodge a volatile parent.
That is so heavy.
It is. Module C is about holding space in the group to process that profound unfairness and ultimately using that processing to define a new identity that exists entirely beyond the addiction.
Which brings us to the culmination, Module D, skills for sustainable recovery. And this is the brilliant part to me. Now and only now do we bring in the heavy cognitive skills.
Exactly.
Because now that the nervous system is regulated from Module A and the automated patterns are visible from Module B, the cognitive skills actually work. The prefrontal cortex is online.
Exactly. The battery is charged. This module builds a trauma-informed relapse prevention plan that addresses all 5 links of the trigger chain, not just the final behavioral one.
So they intervene earlier.
Right. They learn how to intervene at link 2 when they first feel their stomach drop, instead of waiting for link 4 when they're already thinking about the substance.
It is an incredibly tight clinical logic. You regulate the body, you map the automated patterns, you process the grief, fueling those patterns, and then you apply the cognitive skills to build a new future.
It's very structured.
But having a brilliant blueprint still requires a builder. Let's pivot to the final and perhaps most crucial part of our deep dive today. What does this mean for the daily reality of the practitioner delivering this in the room?
Well, the logistics and setting matter immensely here. The curriculum is very clear. This is strictly designed for licensed clinical professionals working in structured, intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization program settings.
They're good to clarify.
Yeah, it is not a self-help book for clients to do at home, and it is definitely not an entry-level guide for someone who has never facilitated a group before. It requires a professional who deeply understands group dynamics and clinical containment.
And what blew me away was the section on facilitator competencies. The curriculum states point blank that the most important clinical instrument in the room isn't the whiteboard, it isn't the 7-layer map, and it isn't the handouts.
No, it's not.
The most powerful intervention is the facilitator's regulated presence. To enforce this, the curriculum actually mandates a pre-session regulatory check.
This is such a critical practice. I can't emphasize it enough.
Let's be real about what your day looks like if you're a clinician in an IOP setting.
It's chaotic.
It is. You are probably running from back-to-back individual sessions. You're gulping cold coffee. You just spent 20 minutes fighting with an insurance company over a denied claim. And now you have to walk into a group room with 10 highly traumatized clients.
You're exhausted before you even sit down.
Exactly. You are almost always entering that room highly stressed. This curriculum requires that before you touch that doorknob, you must pause and gauge your own autonomic arousal on a 0 to 10 scale.
Right.
And if you are above a 5, meaning you are stressed, rushing, activated, you are instructed to not walk into that room yet. You must perform a regulatory action like a deep somatic grounding exercise to get your number down to a 4 or below before you enter.
That mandate moves self-care from being a, corporate wellness buzzword to an actual biological, clinical prerequisite.
I love that.
And there is a hard neurobiological reason for it. It comes down to co-regulation. Our nervous systems act somewhat like Wi-Fi routers. They are constantly pinging each other, searching for cues of danger or safety.
Pinging each other, yeah.
So when a dysregulated client enters a room and encounters a truly calm, grounded, regulated facilitator, the client's nervous system reads those biological cues of safety and begins to settle.
But if you walk in buzzing at a level 7 of stress,
then that biological co-regulation just cannot happen.
Yeah.
Your dysregulation amplifies their dysregulation, and the group container becomes unsafe no matter how good the curriculum material is.
it is so validating to see a curriculum explicitly acknowledge the practitioner's nervous system. I mean, we ask so much of mental health workers, and this extends to how supervisors treat their clinicians, too.
Absolutely. The text stresses that clinical supervision for a facilitator running this curriculum cannot just be about client case management.
Like just checking boxes.
Right. It can't just be about scheduling and treatment plans. It must focus explicitly on the facilitator's biological state. Continual exposure to high AC trauma narratives causes trauma contagion and secondary traumatization.
Yeah, that secondary trauma is so real.
Hearing about severe abuse week after week physically changes the clinician's nervous system. If clinical supervision isn't addressing the toll the work is taking on the clinician, it is fundamentally failing them.
It changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
Your nervous system is the most powerful clinical intervention in the room, which means protecting your nervous system is a professional duty, not an indulgence.
Exactly.
We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We started with the sheer volume of ACEs in the room, decoded the 5-link trigger chain, walked through the 4-module architecture, and landed on the absolute necessity of the regulated clinician.
It's a lot to take in, but it's so important.
It really is.
As we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with a final, very nuanced thought from the source material to mull over. It has to do with how we view the end goal of all this work.
Okay.
The curriculum discusses the concept of post-traumatic growth, or PTG, in trauma-informed care. And it issues a stark warning. PTG is not about forced optimism.
It's not the "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger" bumper sticker.
Exactly. It's not about looking at a client with a horrific trauma history and telling them, well, everything happens for a reason, or trying to find the silver lining in their abuse.
Which people do all the time.
They do. But the curriculum warns that this narrative can actually cause severe clinical harm. It implicitly demands that clients find gratitude for the very abuse, neglect, and suffering that damaged them in the first place.
Which is incredibly invalidating to the reality of what they survived.
Right. True post-traumatic growth is much more complex. It is about recognizing that a person has built genuine resilience, deep empathy, and profound new capacities without having to erase, minimize, or justify the terrible cost at which those capacities came.
Wow.
It's the ability to hold the immense growth and the devastating grief at the exact same time.
That is an incredibly powerful place to land. As you go into your sessions tomorrow, I invite you to consider how you frame resilience in your own practice. Are we inadvertently demanding toxic positivity from our clients, or are we making space for the complicated, messy reality of their survival? If today's conversation has sparked your interest and you want the complete curriculum, all 32 session plans, the clinical foundation chapters, the client handouts, and everything we discussed today, you can get the full book through the link in the episode description. We will see you next time.